Welcome to Boat Buyer's Secret Weapon. I am your host, Captain Matt. Today we're talking Yamaha versus Mercury, gray versus black. What is the best outboard for your boat, for your pontoon, for your center console? So if we look at the history, they've both been around for a long time. They've gone through their ups and downs. They've had great engines. They've had some failures. They have good reputations in some markets, bad reputations in other markets. If you look at the Mercuries of old and the Mercuries of new, you can see they've gone through some serious changes. Yamaha has done the exact same thing. You're looking at, hey, they did have some issues in some years, but now what's the situation and how do they compare? The other thing, if you look at for the Yamahas, they've got several different options, as does Mercury. So let's compare those back and forth. So here's how, if you're going to compare a Mercury to a Yamaha, you should compare the 4-strokes to the 4-strokes in Yamaha. So the Mercury 30 up to the 300 that are labeled as 4-strokes. On Yamaha, they're the 4-strokes, but they label them as inline 4, V6, and the XTO. Then you have the Pro XS and the VMAX Show, the SHO. Those are higher RPM 4-strokes. The jet drives, Mercury has their Verado, which is a supercharge. Yamaha doesn't have it. Mercury also has the C Pro, which is their commercial designation. The standard 4-stroke, it's reliable, it's quiet. That's your basic pleasure boat. I would put that on a pontoon or a tri-toon. I would put that on just a regular deck boat or bow rider, maybe even a center console that I was more using for just pleasure. Hey, I like that quietness. I just want to fire it up and it go, and I don't want to hear it. The Pro XS and the VMAX Show, they're higher torque. They run at higher RPMs. They were built to replace that 2-stroke market where the bass boat guys, all they wanted to do is put the hammer down and just rip down the lake. So bass boats, they're great if you want that more performance. But what I found is the sound is different because they're running at higher RPM. You've got more of a whiny sound. It's not that quiet, almost imperceptible of the 4-strokes. Yamaha and Mercury are both just whisper quiet. The Pro XS, the VMAX Show, they run different, and so they sound different. The jet drives, hey, if you need a jet drive, you know it. If you're in creeks, if you're in muddy, shallow water, those are where you want to get the tougher places where a prop's going to get dinged up. The supercharged Verado, listen, I think that if you really need that extra speed, they're all digital. They kind of got some extra stuff that makes them simpler to run, more complicated motors. So anytime I think more complicated, I think I don't really want complicated on my boat, but they're great. They've been around for a long time. They're very reliable, but they have superchargers in them, which means that there's more stuff that could go wrong. I myself, if I was buying new, I would just go with the 4-stroke on a pontoon. But the Verado, if you want that little bit extra kick, and they're also incredibly quiet. Commercial, we're going to skip that. So here's the thing. If we're comparing them, these are the 5 categories that I look at as warranty. They're the same. On pleasure boats, they're 3 years warranty. The XTO from Yamaha has a 5-year warranty. Reliability. The new engines are incredibly reliable. Now, here's what happens with the Yamaha Mercury conversation. Is somebody said, I will never buy a Mercury. We had a horrible experience with Mercury. Left us stranded all the time. And then you ask, oh, what motor? What boat? Oh, it was our 1973 Mark Twain that we had a Mercury 75 on it, and that thing was a disaster. We had a 1982 on our Lund, and it worked great. It never left us stranded. The reality is that the technology has changed dozens of times since then, and so the Yamaha Mercury conversation, you have to really dig in when somebody says, I'm a Yamaha guy and that's the only way to go. You have to ask, what years? How did you run the boat? What engine did you have specifically? Did you buy it new or did you buy it used? Because a lot of times an engine gets a bad reputation from an individual and they start spreading these stories. Come to find out they bought the boat used and you have no idea how that motor was taken care of. Those are when the issues come up in most situations. The reality is they're both very reliable engines. It doesn't matter. You're talking the Show and the Pro XS, or you're talking the 4-strokes, even the Verado. They're very, very reliable. Are there some bad eggs in the basket sometimes? Yeah, but typically in the first 20 hours of a new motor, if it's going to have an issue, it's going to have an issue in that period of time. That tends to be the case in most situations that they come up there. Next is service cost. I looked at just the 150 4-stroke, and I looked at just the parts, because the labor is going to be what the labor is going to be. Yamaha, Mercury, Tex, they're in your area, they're going to charge about the same labor. There's no drastic difference there. So if you look at the Yamaha, their 100-hour kits, including the impeller, is $200. For Mercury, their 100-hour kits, including the impeller, is $140, but their 300-hour kit is $315. There's a couple additional things that on the 4-stroke, the 150 4-stroke specifically, that Mercury has in their general maintenance, where Yamaha just does a little bit more in their 100-hour. It looks to me over time to be pretty darn equivalent. And if you can do the work yourself, pretty inexpensive. And on the outboards especially, if you have any mechanical knowledge, you get your owner's manual, you watch some YouTube videos, you're going to be able to do everything that needs to be done on those 100-hour services. Dealer network, I think this is what separates Yamaha from Mercury, is the dealer network. And it's not even the dealer network, but it's the local dealers. Let me come back to that in just a little bit. And then price. So I looked at the Build-A-Boats from manufacturers. And I looked at several different ones because every manufacturer kind of negotiates their prices. Mercury's got some locked in transoms with all the Brunswick product, with the Tracker product. So they're insured to be on those boats. Yamaha has to compete with the other independent, not aligned with Mercury and Brunswick. And so what I found is the 4-strokes were comparable. If you were looking at the 150 or the 250 Yamaha versus Mercury, they were about the same, maybe a couple $100 difference when I looked at multiple boats, pontoon, center console, bow riders, whatever. The VMAX versus the Pro XS. The Pro XS, the Mercury, was slightly higher. Now, when I say slightly higher, it was between $800 to $1,000 higher on a $25,000 engine is kind of the ranges that I was looking. So now when you're looking at a boat, compare, look at, build it with the Mercury, build it with the Yamaha. So which is best for you? Well, in my mind, it comes down to that dealer network, but not the worldwide dealer network. The Mercury guy I met at IBEX was going to send me the number of U.S. dealers. They've got 5,000 dealers worldwide. But as I started to think about it and was waiting for his response, I reached out to Yamaha as well, but haven't heard from that contact. It dawned on me that it doesn't matter how many worldwide or US, it matters how many technicians are your area. So what I did is I went to the dealer finder and said, okay, how can people decide in their area? Because over the years, Yamaha has owned the coast and Mercury has owned the freshwater inland lakes. That's just been sort of the way it's worked out with the 2-strokes and just Fond du Lac, Wisconsin being where Mercury's made. They tend to dominate in the Midwest over the last several decades. Yamaha has tended to dominate at the coast over several decades. It's sort of leveling out, I think, in the last 10 years or so. But all that matters is your local area. So what do? I think this is what you do. You look at the Mercury Premier Dealers and Master Technicians. You can read those. Just pause it and read those. On Yamaha, you look for the Factory Trained and the Master Technicians. Again, you can read those. Just pause it and read through what all those mean. And then when you go to the finders, when you go to the Find a Dealer, what you can do is you can click, I want the service center and I want a Master Tech. If I am buying an older engine, so I'm buying a 2000, a 2005, a 2007, I'm going to be more excited to find a master technician in my area or multiple master technicians. There's very few. You may not have one in your area. because they have been through all of the training. They also have, because they've been through all the training and earned that designation, they've been in the industry for 10 years or more probably, and they've seen things. So they're going to be able to diagnose if there's an issue. They're going to be able to diagnose it. Any technician can change the oil and change an impeller. Not very difficult. You can do it. On the Mercury side, look for those premier dealers and the master technicians, and that's going to tell you, hey, guess what? These guys know what they're doing. All you got to do is just click the button, put in your zip code where you're going to run your boat, and decide based on that. Because in my mind, other than price, everything else is so darn close on all of the models. Now, I'm not a technician. I don't work on these every day. But in talking to people all around the industry, that is sort of the consensus that, listen, they're so reliable these days. They do such a great job. The manufacturing, the precisionness, if that's the word, is so dialed in, and they're right on track. So add your comments to the conversation. If you're a Mercury, a Yamaha person, if you had a good or bad experience, put the year, make, and model in the comments so we can know, hey, where is this coming from? If you're buying a boat, check out the Boat Buyer's Toolkit. It's free at BoatBuyerSecretWeapon/toolkit. The Boater Bootcamp, if you're a newer boater, that's free at BoaterBootcamp.com. And smash that like button if you got value here. And remember, life truly is better on a boat.